Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our facilitated conversation. The topic of this facilitated conversation is integrating assessment and management in schools. I know we've got a lot of participants from education sector in this symposium, and we had a lot of good discussions about this topic yesterday. Look forward to continuing the conversation today. Our speakers and facilitators for this conversation are Bruno Diaz, who is the Director of Safety, Security, and Threat Management for Mansfield ISD. Bruno is also an active participant in our network committees. Dr. Loretta Whitson, Executive Director of the California Association of School Counselors, and Chief Deborah Williams, Chief of Police for Clark Atlanta University Department of Public Safety. Bruno, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Britt. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm not going to take too much time from my two co-speakers, but I have to start by sharing a few slides. Sadly, one of the 34 school shootings in 2021 happened to be one of my schools, and I was here when it happened, and I dealt through that. And I want to just a little bit kind of provide an overview of before and after what happened, and maybe it'll help stimulate some of the discussions and bring some validity to it, since it's an actual event. So hopefully you can see my screen. Can someone give me a thumbs up?
We cannot.
You cannot? How about it now?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, so one of the main components, in my opinion, of threat assessment is to bring a sense of reality of the threat landscape to all of our stakeholders. There's this terrible feeling that I see happening over and over and over, which is a feeling of false immunity. I work in a great community. We're a diverse community. We are an A-rated school district, and we have great caring people, great parents, great families. It's a great place to live. And there was this belief that it's not going to happen here. And you keep seeing and hearing that over and over again. And the reality is that violence can reach any place, regardless of how great the community is or the social dynamics. So I came, very early on, I came to my cabinet in May of 2021, and I told them that I was very concerned for the school year, this being the 2021-2022 school year. Following the pandemic, I had been tracking multiple factors that were happening outside of our school environment that I felt would find its way into our schools. It's this continuous cycle of distress, lots of bad news, lots of bad things going on following the pandemic. And I wanted to make my leadership aware of this. In addition to these terrible markers, we also experienced political division, racial tensions, extreme ideology, social unrest, police and community relations. Our kids were watching the George Floyd incident, which was terrible, and financial concerns. Just a very grim outlook for the future. And I also, I'm not making a Second Amendment commentary here. I'm simply stating that firearm accessibility is something that every school official should be concerned with. And 2020 was a record year for firearm sales. And I was left wondering, are these firearms are being purchased in mass, being stored in a responsible way? I tried to search for a metric regarding firearms safe sales, and I could not find an increase in firearm safe sales, which led me to believe that here we are, we're going to have guns more accessible to children at levels that we haven't seen before. So I did a survey, and this was probably the most concerning marker, and I want this to be a strong message to all of our attendees today. You have to promote a culture where students are engaged and they're reporting concerning behaviors. I did this focus group survey, and I found that 90% of our students did not feel comfortable reporting concerning behavior, which is very problematic. We've done, Crime Stoppers have done, a really great job in providing venues for reporting, but the issue with Crime Stoppers is the name, Crime Stoppers. Kids are thinking that by you reporting that maybe a friend is in distress, that maybe that's a criminal issue, that maybe it will become a police matter, when in reality, all Crime Stoppers is doing is providing a venue for reporting. So we need to do a better job at branding so that we're not associating the reporting of something that doesn't amount to a criminal offense as a criminal offense. So we have a whole new campaign now to address this, but this is very problematic. I don't know how many schools have done a survey focused at finding out how comfortable your student body feels about reporting. But if you do, you may be surprised at the answers that you get. 90% is a very high level. And I outlined the reasons why, the most common reasons why kids do not feel comfortable reporting. We are fighting a culture where saying something to a law enforcement official, saying something to administrators equates to snitching. And these are the people that are seeing the most amount of concerning behavior. So we need to get them to report. We need them to get them to speak up. The other issue that I found is that many school districts don't have a defined safety and security framework. They get caught up in this deal of saying that safety and security is a top priority. I got a lot of interesting looks from my leadership when I said, when I asked them to please stop saying that. I told them that their priority is to educate students and to get them ready for college or a professional career. They should say instead that they prioritize safety, but safety and security is not a top priority. And I give them examples for that. You don't have a defined framework. You don't have measuring mechanisms to show how are you leveraging different initiatives. When should you involve law enforcement? When you should not? So it's really important for you to define all of your initiatives and have a really standing plan so that if you're saying that safety and security is your top priority, that you can really show that you mean that. So we put a safety and security framework in place, and we provided a reporting mechanism for parents, students, and the community. This is a standalone system. It doesn't touch our student records database. It doesn't touch a police database. And I want to educate our community. I want to educate our stakeholders on our mission. So when you click on these little plus signs, our parents, our students, and the people we serve, there's a drop-down menu that gives examples of different situations that align with these objectives. So we're trying to improve the quality of the reporting so that they become better informed and they become better aware of the type of information we're looking for. Once they click on this reporting tool, they're taken to our case management system where they're able to attach files. They can provide different details, and this system generates a case number that will become part of the record. Every file, every fact find, there's numerous fact-finding forms and reports that are part of the system. All of these different documents will become part of this case file, and this will follow the case management all the way up into the assessment phase, when we will come in as a team and we will decide on the level of interventions, on the level of concern, and the things that we should be doing to, again, hopefully move the student from a pathway to violence to a pathway to hope. We basically, through our threat assessment process, we want to check, if we were to compare a student to this structure right here, we're looking for how many stressors, how many risk enhancers are present in their life. And then we're checking to see how many pillars of support they have available to them. And what we found is that in most cases, when a student is really displaying homicidal, concerning behaviors, that these support columns are often absent, or they're at risk of collapsing, they're fractured. And our job is to, through our threat assessment process, is not to label or stigmatize, but to try to shore up these failing structures so that it can be successful. And we're not just looking at the behavior per se, we're also looking at their connectivity with the campus. How are they doing academically? If they're failing, let's also develop an academic plan. If they're skipping class, let's develop an attendance plan so that we're looking at the child holistically. Our objective is to lower our detection threshold so that we're catching problems early on when they're small, and we can battle and put the fire away. And rather than trying to use threat assessment as a 11th hour solution when the fire is already a raging fire. So we are working pretty hard. We learned from our incident. And again, I don't want to take too much time from other presenters, but I just, I felt that it was important to state that, yes, we had a school shooting last year. Luckily, no one died, but it was a very close call. We learned from it. And we've been taking a great deal of steps. We already had all of these systems in place. Our issue was reaching students and reaching staff during the pandemic days. And we've done a great deal since October, when the shooting happened, to get to the people that can report and speak up. Our reporting has increased 450% since October. So we've been pretty busy, but that's my piece. I'll jump back in again, but I want to give our my other speakers a chance to speak and maybe provide some feedback on what I presented. So I'm not sure who wants to go first.
Bruno, before you jump out, we've got 2 questions in the chat for you that seem timely. One, do you treat these records as part of the student's academic record? And 2, what access to these records will parents be allowed?
Sure, great questions. It's separate from, we have our own academic record system, so this is separate from them, but because we're the ones collecting it as school officials, it becomes by default part of their academic records. We tell parents, we forge strong partnership with parents. We let them know, we tell them a threat assessment sounds very off-putting, but our objective is the same. We want to keep this from escalating to criminal offenses. We want your child to be successful, and this requires partnerships. So we bring parents in very close, and they get copies of everything that we get. Let's say if there's a witness questionnaire and maybe there's another student involved, we protect the other student's FERPA information, so there's redacting, but they pretty much get everything that we have associated with their child regarding the threat assessment, investigation, and assessment. Hopefully that answered the question.
Dr. Whitson, can we turn to you next?
Sure. Bruno, you set it up really well for me, so where I was going, so thank you so much for that. So a little bit about me is that I was a school district administrator in LA County for 25 years. I oversaw and worked with the police. I worked with school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, nursing, and I also did all the emergency response. And I also worked with setting up community organizing to build trust. And so that's kind of, and also expulsions and suspensions and things like that. So I have this kind of deep place, and then I went into leadership at the university level. And I worked as a chair of educational counseling, and where I focused in on 2 areas, law and ethics. And I also focused in on consultation, how do you work to do community organizing. So that's kind of where I focus in on, and I've had such a long look at education to see where we're fallible, and where we can do better, and what we can do fairly easily sometimes, and a lot of it comes from building trust, not only with the kids, but with adults in our community, sharing understanding and things like that. And then the early intervention. And I have a little story to tell. This is young Warren, who was 4th grade when his father died suddenly of a heart attack. And the principal, the teachers, everyone, and his mom thought he's doing fine. But on Monday mornings, Warren would go to the nurse complaining of a stomachache. And while he did that for maybe a few months, there was a little bit of talk about that. And then they had decided as adults that no one really talked to him, but they decided that they wouldn't let him out of class on Monday to go to the nurse. And so Warren realized that if he misbehaved, he could get out of class. So he began misbehaving. And no one had asked him until he was an adult. And I asked him, what happened when your dad died so suddenly? What did the school do and not do? And so as he shared with it, I said, well, why didn't you want to be in class on Monday? And he says, because we talked about our weekend, and my weekend was without my dad. And so he was a behavior problem for the entirety of his rest of his time in high school. He's thriving now, but that was an easy fix. That was one of those things, if you have enough staffing that are involved. So a lot of people say that teachers are first responders, and I would disagree with that. I think they're first to see things, and we have to educate them to see what's going on in the classroom, whatever that is, certain behaviors, regular professional development, and all that. But also, I think our first responders are our school counselors, our school psychologists, all those folks, nurses, and it takes that village, and that it takes that understanding to know that there is and have enough people in place. And the United States has not committed to that like it really needs to. So there's only 14% of school districts in the nation that actually fully funds their support staff on school campuses. So that starts it, because if you don't have enough staff, then you end up becoming an urgent care center. And all you're doing is next, and you can't dig in deep and you can't dig in early to the situation. And there's the other piece of integrated services that I think is so essential in regards to that. So having access and being able to work with the HIPAA issues and the FERPA, and be able to communicate when we actually refer families to extended services rather than the initial services. So that kind of, action prior to getting to a threat assessment is so essential. And we just, to me, fail to really do that adequately. I was listening earlier today, and I was, there was a few comments about just, the communication and the communication between policing, law enforcement, and schools. Yeah, there is an issue there. So, and that is also a trust issue, and very big. So what I did in my city of Monrovia is set up a quarterly meeting with our police. In the police station, they had a neighborhood room for meetings, and the administration. And so we would talk, and we'd have topics, and we got to know each other. And that really then kind of broke down some of those barriers for talking about kids early on and getting their support. There is also that, that ability. There's also an issue having to do with assessment, because if the school counselors are not trained in assessment or threat assessment, then they stop short of that and say, that's outside of my area of expertise. I don't want to be in that arena doing that. So it gets a little bit dicey when we come to language, and that was talked about yesterday, is the language is also sometimes a barrier to doing this. So the other piece is, how do you get kids to talk to us? How do you build that trust? And the last story I'll say is that I was really impressed by a school district in Northern California, or Central Northern California, which was Santa Maria Joint High School District. And they were struggling with that too. They wanted kids to be able to tell them what's going on. And so this was after COVID. And there was an increase in bullying. There was an increase in violence on school campuses. There was a lot of things going on. I mean, just the acculturation of kids at a high school campus. And so they went and they put a table out in the quad. No one came, so they're just there, they're waving at kids. And then they decided if they put a little wheel, and so they just bought a wheel off of Amazon, and they put little things. And if you got something, you got a pencil, or you got an eraser, and it became fun. And then they began to then open up doors, because when we talk about, that's what's said in the last time, is how do you know what's going on with a child? How do you, it's usually that peer that could tell you, but then they feel like, as I think the last speaker said, or Bruna said, is that they feel like you're narking on them, and they don't, so you have to build that area of trust. You have to explain it, but you can't do it from just an academic way. Oh, we have confidentiality. You can tell us, we won't tell anyone. We have these rules. That's not going to get to them. It has to be a very ongoing, a very purposeful, going into the classroom, doing lessons, getting to know kids, building relationships with them, not only, and letting them know that we are a family. So that's what we call in education tier 1, in which is that climate development. And then from there, and I'll talk later on, but there's other things we can do when we're really assessing kids, which is what we call a tier 2 intervention. And then tier 3 is intensive work, so we call the whole title of that is MTSS, multiple tiers systems of support. And when I've seen it done well, the indicators for bullying, violence, suspensions, expulsions fall drastically when you have a good support at the tier 1 level. So I'll end with that and turn it over to Chief Williams.
And Chief Williams, you're coming to us from a university perspective, which of course differs in many ways from K-12. So please.
Yes, great. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be here with you all today. But as you said, I'm coming on behalf of at Clark Atlanta University, and also as a representative of the HBCU LEEA organization, which is the Historically Black Colleges and University Law Enforcement Executive and Administration. I am Chief Williams. I am the Chief of Police for Clark Atlanta University. I have over 39 years of law enforcement experience, starting with a municipality in the city of Atlanta for 28.5 years. From there, I went over to Mexico to teach the Mexican government the best practices in law enforcement arena from the United States perspective. And after I left Mexico, I had the opportunity to go to a K-12 as a police commander. And I stayed there for 4 years prior to coming here to Clark Atlanta University. So when to hear this conversation and to know that I played a part in assessment while I was with the Clayton County School Police as a police commander, brings it back to where we are today. And some of the questions, some of the things that I've heard from Dr. Diaz and Dr. Whitson, that the common denominator in all of this, the law enforcement community. And not only is it important for us to make sure that we're involved, but we're involved in a positive manner, because as you said, trust is important. When people see the uniform, especially when you're talking about a K-12, if you're moving from a K-12 to a higher ed, it does not matter. Trust matters. Trust is just as important in a K-12 environment as it is in a higher ed. So it's important from a law enforcement entity for a law enforcement officer to make sure we build that trust, because in the event that a situation should occur, one thing we want to make sure that there's an open dialogue between the police officer and the community that we serve. In this particular case, my community is my students. So we want to make sure that there is a line of communication, because if there is something wrong, we want them to feel comfortable with coming to us. The Clark Atlanta University Police Department is a 24/7 police department with both certified officer and non-certified officer. And we also have a 24-hour communication center that's staffed with certified dispatchers. So we want to make sure that that environment that we are creating around our campuses is not only a safe environment, but it is an environment where our students feel comfortable with coming to tell us when they see those indicators. We want them to be able to tell us, okay, Chief Williams, these are some of the indicators that we have observed. What are those indicators? And we as police officers, we need to know those indicators ourselves. So when those indicators are reported to us, we need to know how to respond, because it not only involves the police department, because as you all know, the police department can't do it all. And we're not a fix-all. And that's one thing we need to make sure that we share in our community, whether it is a K-12 or higher ed, that you can't call on the police to fix everything. And when you call on the police shouldn't be coming to respond in a proactive. We should be coming to respond as part of the team. And it takes a full team. When you talk about an assessment, it takes a full team. It involves student affairs. It involves student counseling. It involves our coaches. It involves our academia, our provost. It takes a whole team in order for us to do any type of assessment or behavior assessment when it comes to trying to prevent any type of violence. And so when they call for the police, they shouldn't look at the police as being an enforcer. And that's one thing I like now. When we hire officers, we don't look for the enforcer. We look for the guardian. A guardian is a protector. And that's what we look for when we go to hire our officers, to make sure that you're coming, when you show up on the scene, you're not coming on the scene acting as the big bad police officer. I'm ready to, to arrest someone. I'm ready to do this. But guess what? I'm coming as a part of the team in order to find out the underlying conditions of what's occurring. You're acting as a guardian. A guardian is a protector. And that's one of the things we look for when we hire our officers today. That guardian mindset, because when I first started in 1983, I was hired as part of, not only was I hired, but I was part of a street enforcement unit. So when we responded and when we showed up on the scene, we were acting as enforcers. But now we can no longer act as enforcers. We are acting as guardian because, again, that trust is so important. From the minute you see this uniform, you should not see this uniform as an adversary. You should see this uniform as a partnership, as a partner, not only to our school counselors and our professors, but when we talk to our students, again, that positive engagement is so important. We talk about community policing, but I tell everyone, if you want to see policing, if you want to see community policing, the best place to see community policing is on a campus, whether it is a K-12 or a higher ed, because every day, our involvement, our existence is based upon the interaction we have with our students.
Right, and we've got several questions populated in the chat and few enough that we can ask people to ask them directly. So Jim, do you feel comfortable turning on your microphone and camera and asking your question of Bruno?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Yeah, I just had a question about, I'm with the New Jersey Department of Education, previously with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security Preparedness, where we have a pretty robust reporting and suspicious activity reporting platform. But the one thing that we kind of struggled with was engaging with school communities and students on having them report any, threats or incidents. I was just kind of curious, and again, I'm sure that you've seen like post Michigan high school shooting and after your incident, an increase in reporting, but kind of keeping the students engaged in kind of their eyes and ears and making sure that they are reporting any threats or incidents of concern. How do you keep them engaged? How do you train them on what to look for? Do you do it once a year? Or I'm just kind of curious in that engagement period, and if you do see students participating, because I think in some, at least here in New Jersey, there's some more localized reporting mechanisms, but they're just not really used. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that. And just to provide a little bit more background, last year we put out a PSA for high school students and middle school students, and it really didn't get far. So I'm like, are we just doing it for ourselves to say that we did something? But how do we get students more engaged and encourage them to report?
It's a great question, Jim. I'm glad you're following up with all the pieces that you referenced. So one of the things we did, we brought students in and we asked them, what is it going to work for you? Right. And we were thinking posters, and they said, no, I don't want posters because I don't want anyone to see me taking a picture of a QR code or the number to call, and then I'm going to be bullied. I don't want that. So one of the things that we did was to leverage technology. So every student has a Chromebook, and when they sign in, they get this thing called ClassLink. So we have a dedicated tile, a reporting tile for safety. Within that tile, we have ongoing digital messages, positive things. We have popular students encouraging and promoting reporting. We have our social emotional learning department. They leverage the 5 pillars of SEL, and they push out different things. And we're trying to counter the narrative. We're trying, for lack of better words, we're trying to make reporting cool. And we're trying to say, be a hero, say something. Our branding campaign, it's called This Is Our House. We want to bring the sense of ownership to students. And then there's a messaging that follows for safety, which is not in our house. And there's a list of behaviors that, we don't want. We want a successful culture. And the direct outreach to students involves partnerships between me, our SEL department, our counseling department, where we actually are setting up parental nights where parents come in and we talk to them about risk factors. We talk about the role that they play. We try to, counter the narrative of, the off-putting narrative of threat assessment because it sounds bad, and we try to explain what we're trying to do. So how often do we do this? We want to do it. Currently, we've done it once. And the plan is to do it every quarter. It needs to be ongoing. It can never stop. To answer your question about the increases in reporting, we did not see an increase in reporting following our incident. We saw an increase of concerning behaviors. They were obvious and apparent. I'm talking about kids bringing BB guns or weapons to school. kids behaving violently in school. So behaviors went up, almost like a contagion effect. But 3 months after that, after we started increasing our messaging and our PSA, we saw an increase in reporting. And most of the behaviors that are being reported are behaviors that require tier 1, maybe tier 2 intervention, like Dr. Whitson was saying, coaching, mentoring, SEL practices. We're even embedding SEL practices into the educational framework, class, teaching kids social, emotional techniques in class. So we're doing all of that, but the reporting really increased after our venues increased and the outreach efforts increased. So hopefully that answered your question, Jim.
Thank you.
And I can share information about our PSA campaign and our efforts. I'll put my email on the chat, and if you'd like to see a copy of that, I'll be glad to share that with you.
And Bruno, if you want to share those with Neil, we can also include them in the follow-up email with resources after the workshop if you'd like to share them more broadly.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Star, you've got a couple comments in the chat, and I'm wondering if you want to turn on your video, unmute yourself, and ask a question.
Hey, there I am. No, I just first of all, to all three of you, for someone else that works in the schools, thank you for what you do. And I just really appreciate this training because it's really helpful to me. And so I'm a BCBA and a certified threat manager and the threat assessment coordinator for our district and a behavior intervention specialist. And I'm just pointing out that we're struggling. And one of the things that I'm struggling with the most, we have a lot of extreme behaviors this year and a big increase in kids being brought to threat assessment. And it's the resources where we're really struggling with those community partnerships, because so many things, we have kids that need really wraparound services where we have really good relationships with the community to help us with some of those things. And so I don't know if you have any suggestions. A lot of this whole presentation is about building those networks, and that's really been helpful. And just, one of the things we did is we do have an anonymous reporting tip line so that people can report anonymously. And I think that's a best practice. So that's been helpful. We have had tips brought in, but it's not as active as I would have imagined that it would be. So that means that people are still holding back.
Any recommendations for Star on how do you build those wraparound approaches, especially when so many of the supportive services are really overtaxed right now at this stage in the pandemic?
Sure, I can take that one. There's a program, or it's just a system called COS, Coordination of Services Team, and I can send a document about it that's pretty in depth of how you start one and how you work with one. But the idea behind having a COS team on your school campus is that you bring everyone at the table very regularly, like once a week, and you go through kids very rapidly. So you look at maybe in an hour, maybe 20 kids. So what are the presenting issues? What's going on? Who identified that? Was it in a classroom? Was it in all classrooms that we're seeing? The behavior. And we have at the table, not only you have your administrator, because they're the action person. They're going to be able to do, make any kind of moves that's beyond the scope of your support service, mental health people on your school campus. But you have those folks. You could have the teacher. You could have a community-based agency too, to say, maybe we just need to make a referral right now for therapeutic intervention. So it's one of those quick things, and then you keep revisiting. So you not only bring in new cases every week, but you also revisit those to make sure. So some of it might start off just, with observations, talking to teachers, making sure they're observing, or the counselor going out and observing a student in the classroom and just seeing what's going on, or just having a meeting with that. So it's an action-oriented intervention, meaning you don't walk away with not doing anything with a kid. You do something, and you don't let them fall through the cracks. That's why you keep revisiting where that kid is. Do we need to beef this up? Do we need a more alarming behaviors or things like that? So that is one system that I think is a very effective, and I'll be glad to share that with you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Star, I have another recommendation. I piggyback on Dr. Whitson. Relationships are really important, and bringing people in from the community and finding out who they are. We have social workers in the district. We have LPCs in the district, and we're very active at saying, hey, have you worked with someone else before at the community level? And then we bring them in and we talk to them and we let them know what our challenges are. I'll give a quick example of a case. We had a student who had no history, no disciplinary history, no history of behavioral issues, and suddenly he started behaving very violently. We found out through the threat assessment process that the kid was being raised by his grandmother. Grandmother had major ongoing health issues, and because of COVID, she relied on public transportation. She was no longer taking him to see his psychiatrist and therapist. He stopped taking meds. He stopped getting the support that he needed. He started behaving badly. We learned of a social program, a kinship program for kinship families. They were being raised by aunts, uncles, and grandparents that connected available resources. And we arranged for transportation so that the child would be taken to his appointments and grandma would be taken to the pharmacy to get her medication. Talk to grandma about delivery services for medication, which she did not know existed. So little things like that, and learning about available resources that are at the community level fixed our problem. That wasn't a school related issue, it became one. So and we learned about the program because we had relationships with people that we could call and say, hey, I got a transportation problem. Are you aware of any community-based programs that I can link this family to? And that's how we learned about that. So I just want to emphasize the importance of a relationship with external stakeholders.
Can I say something as well? And also when you talk about your external stakeholders, you want, and I hear the word, I heard it mentioned again, communication, relationship. And when you talk about any type of prevention, that it's important for us to establish those relationships, not only with our internal partners, but our external partners as well. Because once you start reaching out externally to other partners, you will find out that that's something that was a gap internally. And as Dr. Diaz spoke about, it didn't have anything to do with the school, but as they started digging deeper, they found out that there was an underlying condition to that particular incident, to that particular kid having a problem. But had they not reached out farther than their four walls, they probably would have never discovered that it wasn't a situation. So again, it's important for us to make sure we do have those relationships and we're communicating. And when we do that, we not only make our environment a more welcoming environment to our students, but guess what? We also make it a safer community. Because as we said, it doesn't take one individual to do this. We all have to work together holistically to make sure that we're working to achieve this common goal. And that is to make sure at the end of the day, whether you're in K-12 or whether you're in higher education, that the students are there to get their education in a safe environment to make sure they become the best citizens that they can become by us all working together.
Can I just piggyback on what Chief Williams said, because it just brought to mind something that is just it works so well. And it came to the point I started what we called Student Support Coordinating Council, and brought in the YMCA, the police, the food bank. I could go on. The municipalities were all there, and we met monthly. And we talked about systems that helped kids. So when I needed something, if I needed transportation, then I had someone to call. If we needed food, we had this system in place, trust. And as I did that for about maybe 8 years, I noticed at one point about 4 years into it that some of the people that were the leads, because all I wanted was the leads from the organization, or at least I had like the chief of police, if not the captain, so wanted those that were decision makers, because sometimes they would send a proxy and then I'd call them up and I said, no proxies. If you can't make it, we're sorry. We know you're a busy person, but we wanted those at the table. I never wanted it to diminish in value. And it was somewhat, it wasn't smooth sailing. You know, there was a point where the why we were putting in after, we had a problem with after school. We realized that there was real issues and the violence was happening after school. So we spent months just talking about what we could do differently. And when we came up with the conclusion of bringing programs on our school campus, the person that was over the why said, this is going to devastate us, but this is a good plan. And she goes, because we depended on the money that came in from their after school program to really run all the other programs. But that took, you know, months for us to build the relationship and to be really laser focused on students and kids. And when you're that, and then you can put aside some of those turf issues and really make a difference.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for that information. Just because our community resources are so strapped, but you gave me some good ideas about the why and food bank and other resources. Sorry, I think I might have interrupted somebody.
No, that's all right, Star. I was just going to say, to pull from a theme from our last talk, I frequently use tabletop exercises to help those wraparound service providers understand the role they can play. You know, if you go through enough case studies, the substance abuse programs recognize the common theme of substance abuse, or, you know, vocational rehab, all of those different wraparound service providers that may have a contribution to make. Sometimes hosting those tabletop exercises and those regular convenings can build those relationships and foster that understanding. We have a question from Denise in the chat. Denise, do you want to unmute yourself, turn on your video, and ask that question out loud?
Sure. One of the things that we have teams struggling with occasionally is that they get laser focused on student behavior and they miss some of the other threats. Domestic violence spillover related to staff, parent issues or adult issues with things like custody issues that also spill over, and even unhappy parents with coaches or decisions that are made within the school environment. So my question is, how do you feel about having your school team work in the area of concerning behavior related to the rest of the school community and not just being student focused? Thank you.
I can go. Denise, first off, it never happens here. Our parents always behave perfectly, and I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm sorry, I'm joking, but we come across that quite a bit, and we do involve our teams. I can give a quick example. There's been a recent case involving a large group of students, and it was gang related, and very problematic thing to address when the parents are involved in gangs, and you're trying to put the kid in a good pattern, but the parent's still actively involved in a gang, and they're having a feud with a different group, and all of these students are coming together at our campuses. So there's a direct nexus, and we spend a lot of time trying to not necessarily to do gang diversion with the parents, but talking about how the consequences and what the consequences can be, and getting them to see the impact that it's having on their children. I'm not telling you that we were able to fix the problems at home, but based on this active case that we have, which involved a large number of students, we've been able to move out of 14 students. So far, 6 of them have been moved out of monitoring. They're doing well. It involves some changes of campuses and a partnership with the parents. So we have, my answer to you is that we have to consider those facts. We also have a workplace violence prevention program piece that we have to think about, because our employees sometimes engage in very concerning conduct as well. So our team is involved with that, and we have the training and the expertise to provide a valid perspective, the perspective that we bring. So that requires partnerships with our police department. Like Chief Williams, we have our own dispatch center. We have 60 plus police officers assigned to the district. We're a good sized school district. We have 49 campuses and about 35,500 students and 4,500 staff. So those problems do occur, and our team is involved. And I believe, to summarize it, the training and expertise that we bring in conflict mitigation and looking for alternatives to violence proves valuable across multiple sectors.
I'm going to ask one final question because it came up yesterday, and this is really for Loretta and the chief. How do you handle in your respective areas of responsibility communication when students graduate out of a K-12 system and enter into higher ed? And what does that communication or partnership look like, or what should it look like?
Dr. Wilson, you want to go first?
I can go first. So
okay.
That's difficult. You know, it's difficult after they leave. But I can tell you that there are systems that have happened that accidentally handled some of it. And that was our peer counseling programs or peer support programs, where they have more of the bandwidth to stay with kids, you know, each other, if they develop that kind of relationship and support. So I had a situation where it was called Cross-Aid Mentoring Program, and trained high schools, had a class for them, and they worked with younger kids. And after one was in high school, that was 6th grade high school, and then the other one was like 26 or something like that. She calls me and said, you know, Ruben's laying down on the railroad tracks and he wants to kill himself. And just, you know, as the story unfolded, I realized that Ruben, he was no longer even in our school. So he was away from my purview of knowing about him. And his mom had killed himself that way. And I said, oh my God, you guys are talking to each other. You know, it was a surprise. She goes, oh, we all are, you know, now they're on, I mean, this is, I mean, they're way grown, you know, probably approaching 50 years old, some of the older ones, because that was years ago. But she said, we all stayed in touch with our peer or our youngsters, you know, and so they kept that up, and that kind of gave that system of support. And also, I think the idea of building in the people that I think that benefited the most wasn't even the ones that were getting the counseling and support and the peer interaction. It was the ones that were actually trained to understand and build empathy and connections with kids. Because us as school people, we're just barely, you know, I mean, especially this last few years, we're getting a lot of criticism. We're trying to do what we can. How do you build that structures that will have people connecting well beyond high school graduation? How do you do that? And the only way I can see doing it is using the resource that we have that is most abundant, which is our other students. And so in California, like, there's several bills that are coming out in regards to peer support, and, you know, looking at early college students that can come down and work with high schoolers, maybe pay them a little bit because usually they're not having an income, but they're trying to get through school. So other kinds of systems like that, I think, could bridge some of that gap after high school, where there's some connections. And then and they already knew, like this one gal knew that I was the professional. She knew this was well beyond her. And just to conclude the story is Ruben's okay, you know. So we got services, talked to the school district lead and told him what we knew. They got with it, and he got the support that he needed. But you need the students to help you with that.
Thank you. When it comes to communicating, transitioning from a K-12 to higher ed, one thing I realized that people ask me all the time, what's the difference from working in K-12 into higher ed? And I say communication and relationships. That's the difference. And that's why I always harp on that, because it's so important in order, especially when you talk about communicating with higher ed, with our students on campuses, on our university and our college campuses. The communication is so important, because that's how you open up the doors. That's how you open up that door of trust when it comes to providing a safe environment for our students. Not only a safe environment, when I talk about safety, I'm not just talking about their physical safety, but I'm talking about their mental safety as well. So when we open up that line of communication with our students, we're opening up a line of communication for them to communicate with us about their mental state as well. So the way we're doing it here, when I transition over here, starting to involve myself, being inclusive by having those chief meetings, not only having the chiefs meeting, showing up at events, communicating with the students. From day one, we have what we call new student orientation. we open up the doors at that point, but we continue with that communication throughout their, matriculation here on campus to make sure they're in a safe space to tell us their problems. Or either we have what we call, you hear it all over, that See Something, Say Something campaign. It not only involves an emergency situation, but any event that you see an indicator, you see something that's not right with your roommate, who are you going to tell? So we want to make sure that communication piece that we open up with our students is there. When they're not comfortable with telling mom or dad, or when they're not comfortable with telling a professor or their best friend, we want to make sure that they're comfortable with telling us, the law enforcement community, their concerns. Because again, we always say our students are our purpose. And I know that is with K-12 as well. So you all are that, we all are here for our students. And so we want to make sure that that piece is there. We cannot show up every day. It goes back to the old saying, don't tell me how much you know until you tell me how much you care. And that's the bottom line. When we are able to show the student that we do care for them, we care for their well-being, that communication piece comes naturally, because now they have the communication piece, they have their open door policy, they have their home environment, a safe environment, both mentally and physically, that they can communicate. So it takes the SGA meetings, the chiefs meeting, the curriculum activity that they have, showing up, making sure that you are part of the community, and the community is a part of the law enforcement community. So it's important for us to make sure that we're bridging that gap with our students when it comes to communication, to make sure that they're in a safe environment, both mentally and physically.
All right, well, thank you for that.
Can I add something to that? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's another program, and I'll get it to you, but it's something that maybe Bruno knows about because from being in California, but it's called Link Crew. And that is a place where you train your seniors to work with your freshmen and build that kind of relationship. So it helps them assimilate into the school and connect them, which we missed this year because of COVID, So some of those kinds of things that school districts have done, at least in California, it may be more of a national base. I'm not sure, but I'll get the information over on Link Crew, because I think it has a whole system of training for a couple of weeks with the seniors, and then they adopt, so to speak, a freshman, and really are that kind of buddy for them as they assimilate in and really help them. So.
Peers, and like I said, you might not do what mom or dad tells you to do, but guess what? When you hear it coming from a peer, then students are more inclined to listen. So it's important for us to continue to open that relationship with them as well, and also to involve them in what we call peer mediation and conflict resolution.
And we've got a note in the chat that program is international. We've got some Canadian participants here as well. So we are unfortunately over time. Thank you, Bruno, Loretta, and Chief Williams, for all of your insights this morning. We really appreciate your contributions. We are going to take a short break, a 3-minute break. We will reconvene at, let's see, I need to do the math, 1:10 Eastern. And we'll see you again then.